All right, strap in, everybody. Today we're going deep on a story you've probably heard of, at least a little bit. Gary Gilmore and the Executioner's Song by Norman Mailer.
Yeah, a pretty well-known case.
But, and I really want to stress this, we're not just going to rehash the headlines, right? We're talking about a guy who basically said, execute me, at a time when, this is 1976, the death penalty was brand spanking new again in America.
It was a huge turning point.
Huge. And Gilmore becomes this, I don't know, this flashpoint, this symbol of, well, we're going to get into all that. But first, why would someone choose death? What made Gilmore tick? That's what we're going to try to figure out.
And what makes the Executioner's Song so fascinating, and really what Mailer does so well, is he doesn't try to oversimplify things.
Yeah.
He doesn't give you easy answers.
Right.
Gilmore is this very flawed, very human character, capable of incredible violence, but also product of, his environment, a system that pretty much chewed him up and spit him out, you could say.
Totally. So let's rewind a bit, all the way back. Was Gary Gilmore, and the title for this first part is Doomed from the Start. Was he doomed from the start?
Well,
Mailer paints a pretty rough picture of his childhood.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gilmore's early life, it's really like a how-to manual for how not to raise a child. I mean, you've got his father, Frank, who was abusive, controlling, violent.
Yeah.
And Mailer digs up this thing about how Frank was forging checks.
Oh, wow.
Landed him in prison, too. So you've got this model for criminality right from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you've got his mother, Bessie, super religious, but in a way that almost like enabled the dysfunction.
It's like that nature versus nurture thing.
Mm-hmm.
How much, who Gilmore became was because of his family.
Right, and that's where it gets really interesting because Mailer doesn't let us off that easy.
Yeah.
He doesn't just say bad childhood, therefore bad man. He shows how the system plays a part, too. I mean, Gilmore's in and out of juvie doing petty crimes. Then at 19, he goes to prison for armed robbery.
Wow.
And he's in for 13 years.
Oh, my gosh, 13 years. That's got to change a person.
Exactly. And Mailer really makes the point that prison, instead of rehabilitating Gilmore, almost like made him worse.
Yeah.
It's like a graduate school of crime.
Right.
Hardened him, made him more cynical, and honestly just less able to function outside.
You mentioned forging checks earlier.
Yeah.
Gilmore's crimes, they get more serious when he gets out.
Oh, yeah.
But there's this one thing that stuck out to me in the book. It wasn't just that he robbed those gas stations. It was how much he seemed to, enjoy the terror. Like the crime itself wasn't enough. It was like he needed to have that control over his victims.
And, it makes you wonder if it's tied to this bigger thing, this need to be in control, to have power, almost like he was trying to make up for how powerless he always felt.
Yeah.
As a kid, with his dad.
Yeah.
Then in prison. It's almost like a pattern.
Yeah. So by 76, Gilmore's out on parole. He's living with his cousin in Utah, trying to make a fresh start, but you can just feel it in the book.
Oh, yeah.
This tension building, all that baggage from his past, the anger, it's bubbling under the surface.
Mailer does this amazing job capturing that feeling, like something bad is about to happen.
Yeah.
He uses these short sentences
to
describe Gilmore's moods, his behavior.
Yeah.
You almost feel like the walls are closing in.
You really do.
It's powerful.
And that's where I guess part 2 really takes off. We're calling this part Love, Instability, and Brutal Murder. Nicole Baker.
Yeah.
She comes into the story. Young, single mom, troubled past. It's almost like, what is it they say? A recipe for disaster.
It's like you said, 2 volatile elements.
Yeah.
And Mailer doesn't try to romanticize it at all.
No.
The love was intense, yeah. But it was also filled with jealousy and these crazy arguments. You get the sense that both of them, they were looking for something, some kind of escape, but...
And that's where, in the middle of all this, the murders happen.
Right.
2 guys, 2 days. Max Jensen, the guy at the gas station, and then Benny Bushnell, the motel manager. What got to me, reading Mailer's account, is how pointless it all seemed. Especially with Jensen. The guy, he gives Gilmore the money, he does what he says, and Gilmore still shoots him. So it wasn't just about the robbery, right?
Yeah.
There was something else going on.
Exactly. And that's where Mailer's book, I think, it goes deeper than your average true crime story.
Yeah.
He tries to get inside Gilmore's head.
Right.
He even quotes Gilmore saying things like, I just wanted to see what it felt like. Which is,
Chilling.
Yeah, it's chilling, but it also kind of points to this, I don't know, emptiness in Gilmore.
Yeah.
Like he had this hole he was trying to fill, even if it meant hurting himself and others to do it.
It's crazy, too, because then he doesn't even try to get away.
I know.
Gets caught almost right away. It's almost like he wanted to get caught.
It's strange, and I think that's where this whole right to die thing that Mailer explores, that's where it really kicks in.
Right.
Because Gilmore's he's this total contradiction. He kills these people, but then he doesn't want anyone to try and save him. He fires his lawyers, he won't appeal, he's telling reporters, let's do it.
It's 1976.
Yeah.
The death penalty is back after, like, years and years of legal battles, and Gilmore the whole country is watching this, and he's, like, turning the whole justice system on its head.
Right. It's not about whether the death penalty is right or wrong morally anymore.
Right.
It's about this individual freedom. Like, can the state force you to live if you don't want to?
So now you've got the ACLU, all these anti-death penalty groups, even Gilmore's own mom. They're all fighting to save him, saying he's not thinking straight, that he's suicidal because of everything he's been through.
Right, like his childhood prison, all of it.
But Gilmore, he actually says he's never felt more clear-headed, that facing death is giving him a sense of, like, purpose.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Totally. And this is all playing out on TV, in the newspapers.
Yeah.
Gilmore's like, he's this weird celebrity now. He's doing interviews from death row. Everyone is talking about him.
It's a media circus.
Exactly. And that's where I think Mailer himself kind of becomes part of the story.
Oh, absolutely.
He's not just writing about it, he's in it.
Yeah. He's talking to Gilmore, he's reading the court stuff,
Yeah.
trying to figure out who this guy really is and what made him do the things he did.
And it's weird. You know, Mailer, he was against the death penalty.
He was.
But in the book, he really makes you, I don't know, almost like Gilmore. He shows his intelligence, that he could be charming.
Right.
It's kind of strange, don't you think? Given his stance on capital punishment, doesn't that make the whole message kind of,
complicated? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes The Executioner song such a great book.
Yeah.
Mailer, he's honest about the contradictions. He shows Gilmore as this complex person, and he makes us, the readers, confront our own ideas about crime and punishment and what it really means to be human, you know?
There's this part that really stuck with me. Mailer's describing Gilmore's cell on death row.
Yeah.
And he talks about the cigarette smoke and the way the light comes in and all the prison noises. It's so real, you could practically feel what it was like to be there.
Mailer's a genius at creating atmosphere. He drops you right into the scene.
Yeah.
And he doesn't shy away from the ugliness of it.
It's like he's trying to make us understand what it felt like to be Gary Gilmore.
I think that's exactly it.
To carry all that, all that baggage from his past.
Yeah, and that desperation, like here and now.
Right. And I think, maybe that helps explain why he chose to die. It wasn't just about wanting to be dead. Maybe it was about having some control, finally, over his own life.
In a system that had always controlled him.
Yeah, yeah. And ultimately, that's what he got, right? Control. January 17th, 1977, he's executed by a firing squad. Mailer doesn't hold back on the details there either. The countdown, the blindfold, Gilmore's last words, let's do it.
And with those 3 words, it's like he becomes this symbol of this whole complicated moment in American history, right?
Yeah.
This time when everyone is arguing about justice and punishment and what it even means to be free.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, I mean, this is about way more than just one guy and what happened to him. It's about how the system fails, about love and what happens when it goes wrong, and how much the media loves a spectacle.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot. Gilmore's, his whole crazy life, those brutal murders, the media frenzy around the trial, and Mailer's book, The Executioner Song. It's such a powerful book.
Oh, yeah.
But, and I keep coming back to this, like, what does it all mean? What are we supposed to, as the listeners, what are we supposed to take away from all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And I think, honestly, that's kind of the point that Mailer's making. He doesn't want to give us a nice, neat answer, He's not trying to wrap everything up in a bow.
Right.
He wants to make us think about those gray areas.
Yeah.
The parts of human nature that are messy and complicated.
Yeah. I have to admit, when I first heard about this case, I thought it was pretty simple. Bad guy, bad things, gets what he deserves.
Right.
But Mailer's book, it just totally changed my perspective.
He forces you to look deeper, doesn't he?
He does. He shows how Gilmore's I know his choices, his whole life really, was shaped by stuff he couldn't control, but also stuff he could.
Exactly.
And it makes you think, like, what does justice even mean when someone's fate, it's almost like it was decided from the beginning.
Yeah, and that ties into that whole debate we talked about, the right to die thing. But there's this other layer there, too, that question of, free will versus, I guess you could call it fate.
Yeah.
How much control did Gilmore really have?
Right. It's like, was he always going to end up like that from the moment he was born? I mean, his family was...
It was rough.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, that's the heart of the philosophical question that Mailer's wrestling with.
Yeah.
And he's inviting us to think about it, too.
Yeah.
He lays out all the pieces, the abusive dad, all the time Gilmore spent locked up.
Right.
But then he also shows these glimpses of, the fact that Gilmore was intelligent, he could be charismatic. He even had these moments of self-awareness. It's like Mailer saying, okay, here's everything, you figure it out.
It's a lot, that's for sure. But then there's that whole, like, media spectacle aspect. Yeah. Which Mailer is so good at capturing.
Oh, he nails it.
It's not just, like, he's not just reporting what happened. He's showing how the media and the public, how they gobbled it all up, how they twisted it.
And in a way, he's making us part of that.
Yeah.
He's making us think about why we are so fascinated by these kinds of stories.
Right. Why are we so drawn to this true crime stuff, to violence, to the dark side of people? What does that say about us?
It's an uncomfortable question.
It is. And, it makes you wonder, like, would Gilmore have been so famous, so notorious, if he hadn't wanted to die? If he had just, done the normal appeals and all that?
Interesting question. Because by choosing to die, by saying no to the system, that's what turned him into the symbol, right?
Yeah.
He became this lightning rod for all these huge questions that make people uncomfortable about justice and free will and the meaning of life. I mean, big stuff.
We've been talking a lot about how great Whaler's writing is, and it is.
It really is.
But one thing I really admire is that he doesn't shy away from the ripple effects.
Oh, yeah.
He shows how Gilmore's actions, how they hurt people, the families of the victims, obviously.
Of course.
But also Nicole Baker. And even he talks about the guards, the ones who had to, actually carry out the execution.
Yeah. He could have just focused on Gilmore, made him this, tragic hero or something.
Right, but he didn't.
But he shows the cost, the human cost of what Gilmore did. He reminds us that real people were destroyed by those choices.
And I think, maybe that's what we can take away from all of this, from our deep dive. What are we supposed to do with all this information?
I don't know that there is a right answer.
Yeah.
But I do think that the Executioner's Song, it gives us a new way to look at our own world, at how we see justice and the choices we make as people and as a society.
It reminds you that things aren't black and white, good and bad. Even the worst actions, they come from somewhere.
Often from really dark places.
Yeah.
And it makes us think about, the systems we build, how we punish people, and if we really believe that people can change even after doing terrible things.
It's a lot. But, if you haven't read The Executioner's Song, you really should.
I agree.
Be warned, though, it's a long book.
Yeah, it's not a light read.
But it's worth it.
It definitely is.
And as you're reading it, think about this. Think about what Gilmore's story tells us about free will.
Yeah.
About how much we're really in control of our own lives when so much is decided for us.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into The Executioner's Song. And until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.